Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten here with Zach Guggenheim as we cover every single Big Ten team, looking into the rosters, the players, the coaches, going in depth about all the Big Ten, doing it our way where we talk about each and every 18 teams in the Big Ten. Today, we're going to talk about the playoff model that Tony Petitti has, the 4 plus 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1. All right, say that 5 times fast. You're going to get a tongue twister for sure. And then Zach and I are going to give our first team all Big Ten. We're going to go through it, pick it together, and that'll be an exercise where we have to agree on certain guys, and that'll be fun to figure out. So if you're listening on podcast, please do give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate that. If you're here on YouTube, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Certainly helps out the channel and helps defeat those dirty SEC podcasts that have just been doing this for way too long. We gotta get some good Big Ten podcasts in here to cover this kind of stuff. So appreciate it. Zach, you ready to talk some playoff format stuff?
Yeah, I'm ready to go to war for a man named Tony Petitti.
Well, and I don't think we have to agree with everything Tony Petitti says. There are certainly things that Tony Petitti wants that I don't necessarily agree with, but there are things that I think Tony Petitti wants that I do think people need to hear, that it's not all crazy talk.
Right. Well, and I think, it comes out, we talked about this last week when Paul Fraudbaum decided to rip Tony Petitti and the Big Ten media days, particularly talking about the playoff format. And I think the people, so I'll just come out and say it. I don't like the 4-4-2-2-1 model. And I mean, I think we've probably talked about this. I think we disagree a little bit on this, but I don't like the idea, as much of a Big Ten homer as I am. I don't love how it maximizes the SEC and the Big Ten over the ACC and the Big 12. But in this context, in this climate of college football, I can understand it, because if you look at the power structure of college football right now, it's very clear that it's the SEC and the Big Ten above the other conferences. I think I would love a model where it can kind of rise and fall as the power structure changes, which it will over time. But at the end of the day, this is why I would say I would go to war for Tony Petitti. I'm being somewhat facetious, but what Tony Petitti is arguing for is objectivity. And that is what everybody else is going against, which for the SEC, I understand that. For the ACC and the Big 12, I don't. Because the ACC and the Big 12 is a bad year away from just having one playoff team every single year. And like the Big 12 experienced that last year. The ACC almost experienced that, if not for a ridiculous ACC championship game at the end of the season. And so, and we saw what happened at the end of last season, where all the SEC honks were crying about teams that shouldn't have been in getting in while their teams were left out. And listen, the more they cry and whine and dominate the radio waves and the TV waves, people are going to listen more and more and more. Why? Because we've seen it happen, right? We've seen Nick Saban cry about Alabama possibly getting left out, and they magically get in. Now, granted, they were great teams and they ended up winning the title. But if you look throughout history, at least the past playoff history, no team has benefited from subjectivity more than Alabama and Nick Saban. They've gotten chance after chance after chance because of subjective means. And the reality is the power brokers of the playoff, whether people want to recognize it or not, are the same people that own the rights to the SEC, which is ESPN. So I don't understand why you would want more subjectivity if you're the Big 12 and the ACC. I can understand why they don't want a 4-4-2-2-1 model, and I'm okay with making it more equalized. I know other people wouldn't, but I think you have to fight the idea. You have to fight against a ton of subjectivity, because ultimately that's going to benefit. It's going to benefit the teams that are most well thought of, which means who wins the most hypothetical matchups. We don't want that. We're against that here.
Well, and who has the most history and everything too, right? I mean, Indiana should not be getting, put in the top 25 at like 24 and 25 this season based on what they did last year, the number of guys they have coming back. But because of the historical issues with Indiana in their program, people are not respecting them, and they're trying to say, oh, it's just a bad schedule and this, that, and the other last year, when in reality, there were other teams that played bad schedules too and played bad teams, and they didn't do nearly what Indiana did to some of those teams. So let me set the stage here on this playoff talk. Okay, so right now Tony Petitti is vying for the 4+4+2+2+1 playoff model, which is 4 automatic bids for the SEC in the Big Ten, 2 automatic bids for the Big 12 and the ACC, 1 automatic bid for the highest ranked group of 5 champion, and then there would be 3 at-large bids. In addition to this, Tony Petitti is also vying for 2 play-in games for the SEC in the Big Ten. The number 3 team in the Big Ten faces the number 6 team. The number 4 team faces the number 5 team. This would all be in the same conference. He is looking at this as replacing essentially championship weekend, because as many people complained about this season, the championship games didn't even matter. It was just one more game for them to play where, yeah, you won the conference, but if everybody has their eye on the national championship in the playoffs anyway, it was like, okay, well, everybody still got in anyway, right? SMU still got in. Penn State, their ranking didn't change at all. All you were playing for was to get a bye, which some teams were saying wasn't even worth it. They didn't even want to bye in the Big Ten or in the playoffs. So that's kind of where we're at with the Tony Petitti's model. Brett Yormark, Jim Phillips, and Greg Sankey, the commissioners of the SEC, ACC, and Big 12, were all vying for the 5+11 model, which is an automatic bid for every conference, the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, the SEC, and 1 group of 5 champion, the highest ranked one, and then 11 at-large bids. Those 11 would all be chosen by the committee. That is what the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC are vying for. Now, it wasn't always that way. Greg Sankey with the SEC wanted the 4+4+2+2+1 model at one point, but then he went away from that and joined into the 5+11. One of the reasons why this matters so much is the playoffs are not going to change unless Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey agree on the playoff model. We'll have 12 teams again next year unless these two guys come together and decide on a model together. The Big 12 and the ACC can give their input, but at the end of the day, they don't have any decision making here. It's all the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC in this situation. Zach, I think you make a lot of good points about the 4+4+2+2+1 model that Tony Petitti is putting out there. I am totally on board with what Mike is saying, though, is that the SEC and the ACC have to go to 9 conference games. Having 11 at-large picks blatantly favors the SEC. Now, I will acknowledge the Big Ten did this to themselves, right? The Big Ten did this to themselves by going to 9 conference games when nobody else was doing that. However, I would argue that's better for the sport to have more good games. And so the idea here is either the SEC goes to 9 conference games and the ACC goes to 9 conference games, or the Big 12 and the Big 10 go down to 8 conference games. But why would we do that? That isn't going to give us good, better games. Sure, it might give us some more out-of-conference games, but at the end of the day, it's going to give us those 3 cupcake games that everybody plays, that everybody complains about, that Indiana is doing, right? So do you want more good games or do you not want more good games? I think that's really the question here. But overall, the Tony Petitti model that I mentioned, 4+4+2+2+1, is the way the Big Ten has to go right now. I don't think it's the perfect model. I don't love it, but I just do think it's the way to go right now with unequal scheduling in college football. Yeah. You also have this in tons of other leagues in sports, right? Now, I'll be at professional leagues, and people don't want college football to be professionalized. I get that. But one of the reasons why it worked to have these, selections and stuff like that before was because you didn't have this much parity in college football. Sure, you have, more, less parity back then. Back then, you had 2, maybe 3 teams, maybe 4 teams that could win the national championship. Zach, I think we honestly have 6, 7, maybe 8 teams in college football this year that could win a national championship. And to me, it would be awful if one of those teams got left out because they were 10-2 and 4th in their conference, because we just saw a team go 10-2 and be 4th in their conference and go win the national championship. I think it's a great point that the Big Ten has. I think it's something that needs to be considered, especially when you look at the conference games and the unequal value there.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you're bringing up is the reality that things are not standardized in the sport, which, everybody's, we're looking at the playoff model, but the bigger problem is nothing is standardized across college football. And so I think the big reason why Greg Sankey walked away from 4-4-2-2-1 is because with it came, a charge to say, you've got to play 9 conference games. Well, guess what? The SEC doesn't want to do that. They don't want to put themselves at risk of looking weaker and giving their own conference 9 more losses or 8 more losses, I think it would be, which I can understand. Like, why would you put yourself at a disadvantage? But the reality is this sport desperately needs more objectivity. That's part of the reason why we wanted to expand the playoff. Was we knew that there was a need for objectivity so that the sport could gain more regional prestige, right?
Well, and more parity too, right?
Yeah.
Increasing the playoffs makes it feel like more teams can win a national championship. We have Nebraska fans saying, hey, if we just make the playoffs, our recruiting will get better and we can win a national championship then. Nebraska wasn't even thinking about getting anywhere near the 4-team playoffs anytime soon. But now you have the 12-team. You saw Indiana do what they were able to do last year, and you're saying, okay, let's go 10-2. Let's go 11-1. We got a chance. In the past, we would have been ranked 9th or 10th if that happened, and we wouldn't even had a shot at the playoffs. But now you can make the playoffs and get some more respect. And I got a secret for people. Recruits want to go places where they feel like they can win. And right now, it feels like you can win more programs than it has ever felt like before.
Yep. Agreed.
So the other thing I want to talk to you about, and The Alchemist just gave $2. Thank you again,
wow.
The Alchemist.
Thank you
for another super chat. Appreciate that. You're very generous. We appreciate that. Another thing I want to talk about here are the play-in games, because the play-in games seem to have many people very upset. A line that Tony Petitti had was that he doesn't think an 8-4 Big Ten team that lost an out-of-conference game and then lost 3 games in the Big Ten should just be completely discarded and say, you have no room to get into the playoffs. That set off a lot of people. A lot of people said, well, why in the world are we even having a playoff if we do that kind of stuff? And I get that, but I also see where Tony Petitti is coming from, because you know what I'm hearing right now about a certain team in the SEC, Zach? What? I'm hearing that if Florida goes 8-4, they should make the playoffs.
Uh-huh. Wow. So wait. Let me get this straight. So a Big Ten team goes 8-4. They shouldn't sniff the playoff. But an SEC team goes 8-4. Let's roll out the red carpets. Where did we hear this before? Oh, yep. A year ago when 3 9-3 teams were crying while they were being left out of the playoff because an 11-1 Indiana team made it in over them.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing is like you have teams going out here and winning their games and they're still not getting respect for it because there are strength of schedule metrics. They don't want to look at strength of record. In fact, they want to change the strength of record metrics because it didn't it didn't suit them well enough. But they have these strength of schedule metrics and say, well, if we play a tougher schedule, that actually means we're a better team. No, it doesn't. The way you play and winning or losing games makes you a better team. Not if we're 8-4 and we have a really difficult schedule. And I think the important thing to dictate with that too is that Tony Petitti isn't necessarily saying an 8-4 team should make the playoffs. All he's saying is that an 8-4 team should have the opportunity to play another team and get into the playoffs. Now, I'm not looking at it from that perspective as much as I'm looking at it from the fan perspective. Zach, what would you rather see on, championship weekend? Would you rather see Oregon and Penn State play for basically a meaningless bye between the two teams and a meaningless loss for one of the teams? Or would you rather have seen Indiana face Iowa and Ohio State face Illinois last year? Right? We can get into, well, Illinois didn't deserve that. Okay, maybe they didn't. But they still have the opportunity to play for it and possibly get in over in Ohio State if they beat Ohio State. I don't think they would have beat Ohio State, but they still have the opportunity to do so, right?
I mean, I'll be honest, I would have liked all those games, but that Penn State-Oregon game was pretty sweet.
But it didn't have any meaning. It didn't. I agree it was sweet, but when we got done watching it, it was like, okay, but Penn State's still in the playoffs, and they're still a 5 or 6 seed.
Well, but see, maybe this is where I would disagree a little bit. Is I think the talk about buys and whether they were important is a little overblown. Like I think Oregon got a bad draw, and I think the other teams that got buys weren't great, right? Like Arizona State got a bye, Boise State got a bye. And
Georgia had a hurt starting quarterback.
Yeah, Georgia got a bye, and their starter was out, and so I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that states that the buys weren't helpful. I don't necessarily buy into that. I do think that though that those games did mean something, but it certainly didn't mean as much as a play-in game would have meant. But I think based off of 1 year is too, like, I don't like that we changed the format after 1 year. It's too little data to say it didn't work.
Yeah. And
I changed the topic on that.
No. I like what you said, but that's the hardest part right now, right? Is that right now the Big Ten and the SEC hold all the cards. The Big Ten, though, is willing to play no more money and say, well, let's just not change the format at all. If you guys can't do what we want you to do, which is either do this model or go to 9 conference games, one of the two, the SEC has an option. If you don't do one of these two things, we're fine.
Yeah.
We got a big TV contract. And guess what? Your TV contract lasts longer than ours. So when our TV contract is up, we'll do it again. And we'll make even more money. And we'll make more money than you. So even if you get more teams in the playoffs, we're still going to be making more money than you because the Big Ten is sitting pretty with their TV contract and the possibility of an even bigger TV contract even sooner than what they have. So for me, I look at all this and I say, well, I wish this would happen. I wish this would happen. But if I'm looking at this objectively, this is a pretty great move by Tony Petitti to hold the SEC's feet to the fire and say, do what we want, or you will not make nearly as much money as we will. And guess what? That's going to help us out.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Because in a lot of ways, the Big Ten, and again, who's whining about this? It's the media networks that own the rights to the SEC and the conference commissioners outside of the Big Ten. So why do we see so much vitriol? Because we know that it hurts them and it benefits the Big Ten.
For sure. For sure. David French asked, would a college commissioner fix the issue? I don't think a college commissioner would fix every issue, but they would definitely start fixing the smaller issues that are that are creating some of these issues, right? Yeah. Scheduling is a huge thing that needs to be figured out right now. And it's not just the 8 games versus the 9 games. It's out of conference games and how do we work this? And then also you would hope that a college commissioner would have some say into the playoff committee, and how they choose teams and stuff like that. And that's the other part of this too is I know the SEC wants the committee to make as many decisions as possible, but the Big Ten doesn't play the buttering up the media game that the SEC does. I don't know if people know this, but those events that the conferences put on, like media days, spring meetings, and stuff like that, they are very, very heavily influenced on creating a good time for the media. I went to the Big Ten Media Days 2 years ago. I didn't get to go this past year because it was in Vegas. But the Big Ten told all the media people to go meet at one of the bars and said, first round on us. The Big Ten bought every single media member the first round of their drinks. You want to know why these conferences do this kind of stuff? It's to gain favor because they know the media dictates a lot of people's opinions out there. And while the Big Ten is getting better at doing stuff with the media, they're also not making it a priority. It's the SEC that goes and not just, gets ESPN to think of them well because they're their TV contract, person, but they're also going to On3, Yahoo, 24/7, all of these things, trying to get the media on their side, trying to get public attention on their side. Why did they go to all this trouble to make a documentary? Sure, money, but also so that way they could prop up their product and say, look at what the best is in college football, even though on episode 8 you have to watch a team completely lose their national championships hope because a Big Ten team absolutely demolished them in Ohio State over Tennessee.
I need to go watch that episode. I didn't realize that was in there.
I think it was episode 8. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was.
Man, that's a hit to the propaganda. My gosh, what were they thinking?
It's totally true. I mean, when you start getting into some more of this media stuff, you see how much more certain conferences start to favor media over other conferences. Yep. I really do feel like the Big Ten needs to do a better job of it, but at the same time, I also like that the Big Ten is like, we're just going to move in the background and not worry about trying to pander to the media. So I kind of hate it, but I also kind of like it. So it's a little bit of a weird situation.
Yeah. Well, it's like anything. If you know how to, care for the media, if you know how what's gonna butter them up, like they're gonna say nicer things about you, whether they're intentionally do or not, right? That just it's part of human nature. And so it makes sense that they would, like the SEC would do more of that. And it's, as much as we make fun of the SEC, I don't think we really think they have good teams. We do think that they put out a good product, right? It's not like they're all terrible and bad, but there's a narrative that we have to push back against. And I think to the point about a college commissioner, the thing that a college commissioner does is it looks beyond the media narrative and actually sets real, objective framework. So that scheduling piece that you were just talking about, honestly, if a commissioner mandated scheduling and regular scheduling practices, whether it's conference games, out of conference games, even though the schedules would still be weighted differently, it would be much easier to kind of get rid of the stupid crying about strength of schedule. And you say, listen, we got schedules to be as equalized as possible. You're never going to have an equal schedule, but we at least got it fairly even compared to records last year. And so we're not going to look like strength of schedule matters, but what's going to matter more is wins and losses. You can't really do that right now. I think there is a fair thought to say an 11-1 group of 5 team, for instance, is not the same as maybe an 8-4 SEC team. I think you can make that argument, but the reason why you can make that argument is because schedules are so overweighted, because you make the schedule years in advance and you can make the schedule do whatever you want to a degree. And I think a commissioner would really help with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do want to take a moment and look at this top 25 from the coaches poll that came out, because I do think that this helps us understand that media narrative we were talking about a little bit. And to Zach's point, I do think that the commissioner could help that in some ways. So if you haven't seen, the coaches top 25 poll came out, it has Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, and Notre Dame in the top 5, followed by Clemson, Oregon, Alabama, LSU, Miami at number 10, followed by Arizona State, Illinois, South Carolina, number 14, Michigan, and then Ole Miss, SMU, Florida, Tennessee, number 19, Indiana. I love that they're getting some recognition there. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word. And then number 20, Kansas State, followed by Texas A&M, Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech, and Boise State. Zach, I'm seeing a lot of basically the playoff odds, pretty much in order here. The teams that have the best odds to win 10 or more games this season. The two teams with the highest odds, Penn State and Ohio State, minus 350 and minus 300 on FanDuel. And then Texas is actually minus 220. They are 6th, but still up there at number 1 in the top 25. But you just kind of look at these, or I'm sorry, this is to win 10 plus games, not playoff odds, but still it's kind of the same thing. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, some of this media stuff really shows how much the coaches differ from the media in ways. Indiana wasn't even on a lot of these top 25s, right? Penn State wasn't getting everybody's recognition. Ohio State on a top 25, Brett McMurphy's the other day, was number 6 on his. And now the coaches are coming out. Indiana's in the top 20. Illinois is up there at 12. Ohio State and Penn State are at 2 and 3. It kind of shows you a little bit more about what actual football minds and not just the media people are thinking. I will say the SEC does have 9 teams in here compared to 6 to the Big Ten, so I don't love that. But at least some of the other stuff I do think is better thought out than the media.
Yeah. When someone can give me a good reason why LSU continues to be ranked in the top 10, when Brian Kelly continues to choke games away, I want to hear the argument.
Because LSU as a 9-3 team should be in the playoffs, Zach.
Yeah, it's too bad they were 8-4.
If only they were 9-3.
Yeah. Although, Tony Petitti made the point, 8-4. Maybe you could make the playoff. I think the narrative, thankfully, is starting to shift. I don't know, I've mentioned them a lot on this show, but Kings of the North just did a 5-episode mini series on essentially the 25 years that the South dominated the sport from 1998 to 2023. And it's a really good listen. I'd encourage you guys. But I think one of their points at the end of it is that the narrative is starting to shift back in favor of not that the North is better, but that North can be as good as the South, which I think I appreciate their research. I appreciated their conclusion, but I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I think the coaches poll bears that out. I think the media poll bears that out. I think a lot of what we're hearing from media members during the off season, even a lot of people are saying, who's your most overrated team? And a lot of people are saying Illinois. And I'm like, listen, I don't know why we're saying Illinois, but not saying LSU, Alabama, Miami, South Carolina,
Florida, Tennessee.
I don't know what Tennessee is going to do. I don't know what we're seeing there.
Yeah. I had a guy I was going back and forth with a little bit, not very much on Twitter because I don't go back and forth with people all that much anymore. But he was like, talking about, well, all the odds have the SEC teams higher, so they must be better. And it's like, do you not understand how odds are made? Like these odds are made based on trying to get people to bet them. Sure, it's helpful in seeing some of this stuff with like what people think. So it's not uncommon to see media polls and coaches polls go alongside with a lot of these odds. But like it's not a proof of to say like, oh, well, this team is definitely better, because all it is people's opinions. And all it is people betting money that's not going to work out for them. It's one of the reasons why the SEC has so many overrated teams every single year. Yes, Michigan was overrated last year at the beginning of the year. I don't think very many people could have predicted the quarterback issues they would have, but Michigan was overrated last year. You know how many SEC teams were overrated in their top 25? Georgia was the number 1 team. They didn't win a playoff game. Alabama, I believe, was the number 3 team. They didn't make the playoffs. LSU, like you said, was up there in the top 10. They went 8-4. Like every single year, it is SEC teams that get overrated and thought of too highly, and then it just happens again the next year, time after time after time. Now, 3 years ago, that didn't necessarily happen as much because the SEC was the dominant conference then. But these past 2 years, it's happened both years because the Big Ten, at the very least, is equal with the SEC.
Yep.
So, Philip asks, why Tennessee? Well, I don't think Joey Aguilar is as good as they think, and I think that you have a ton of culture issues down there. Boo Carter, Nico Iamaleava. I think that defensive line is brand new. I don't think they reload guys quite the same. Their offensive line, they're ready to fire their offensive line coach down there at Tennessee. Could they be a ranked team at the end of the season? Sure. But I just don't know how you objectively look at this Tennessee team and say, oh, yeah, this is going to be a top 25 team for sure.
Yeah, I mean, between the culture, but then, man, I just go back, and I know Ohio State was ready they were ready to drill people. But, I mean, if you compare that game to the rest of their playoff wins, and I know they decimated Oregon too, but Oregon was much more about just the wrong place at the wrong time. Tennessee was not a good team. Like, we overhyped them so much going into that game. And like you could tell in the bodies, right? Like they came out in the pre warm-ups and they're like, we're going to intimidate you. And I'm like, that's who what's your strength and conditioning? Like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, it's not great. Not great.
Yeah. People. And so again, they got an SEC bump, because, well, they only lost out, or no, did they beat Alabama or they lost to Alabama? I'm trying to remember.
Who, Tennessee?
Yeah.
I believe they beat Alabama.
Yes, they beat Alabama. Everybody thinks, oh, they're great. But Alabama, again, was not great a year ago. They were decent, right? They were not very good. They weren't elite. And I think Tennessee against Ohio State proved they were not elite. They weren't even really good. They were just good. And now you have no quarterback like Joey Aguilar. No offense. I don't think that was a good trade for them. As much as we've given Nico a hard time, I would be surprised if they finished ranked, like even close to being ranked.
Yeah, I think they could sneak into the 25 because of the 8 conference games, and I'm pretty sure they play an absolute cupcake in the out of conference. So, they're probably going to rack up some wins there. But yeah, overall, I mean, this doesn't make very much sense there. And then Philip clarified he meant why is Tennessee ranked, so I read that wrong. I apologize, Philip. Blue Wolverine says hello all. Hello Blue Wolverine. Thanks for being here, man. We appreciate it. Fisherman says BYU shouldn't be ranked. I agree on that too. I mean, the top 25 is always, let's throw a group of 5 team here toward the end, and then let's backfill it with Big 12 teams that we think are going to be good, but we don't know. Like, you have
it's
a
legit
Big 12 team.
What you see, right? Yeah. Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech. It's like,
Yeah.
we think they're going to be good.
Yeah, you have Arizona State up there at 11. Sam Levitt, and they've got a couple good wide receivers there, and they got some guys coming back on defense, I believe. So makes sense for them to be up there a little bit higher. But I still don't understand what Arizona has coming back that's anywhere close to what Indiana has coming back. Like that's completely perplexing to me that you would have Arizona State over Indiana.
I think it's probably more about perception than any, like Arizona State took Texas to double overtime, whereas Indiana, in a lot of people's minds, got blown off the field. I'm not saying that's true, but I think again, this is a perception thing. Like Arizona State, I think while they're not a big time program, I think they have a little bit more staying power than Indiana. And I think the fact that they probably should have beaten Texas in that bowl game or in that playoff game probably lends them a bit more credibility than Indiana. And I do wonder how much of the ranking is a shot at Cignetti, which I don't think is fair. But I do wonder, like Levitt's or who's their Dillingham. Dillingham, I think, is a very likable young guy. I think Cignetti's kind of like, I don't care what anyone thinks about me. And people are like, all right, fine. We're going to drop you. And he's like, I don't care. I'm just going to keep winning. Google me. So like, he just doesn't care.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think there's a lot of hype there for Dillingham. And I'm not necessarily trying to hate on Arizona here. I just think too low on Indiana, especially when you look at the comparison of what Arizona State brings back versus what Indiana brings back. Blue Wolverine says Oklahoma is not ranked but favored over number 14 ranked Michigan. Yeah, on FanDuel right now, Oklahoma. It's at Oklahoma, so I do think that probably adds to it. But Oklahoma is favored by 2.5 over Michigan here. I was surprised that Oklahoma wasn't ranked. They seem to be getting a lot of love from the media and people, and they do have some Vegas odds and stuff and FanDuel odds that favor them. But it is striking to see the number 14 team in the country facing an unranked team and not even favored in the game, albeit it's a close spread there, but not favored.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. We went really long doing that, Zach. Do we want to do the first team All-Americans, or do we want to save that for a different day?
Oh,
I think it might take us a while to do.
Yeah, maybe we should kick it to Sunday.
All right.
When we'll be in the same state together on Sunday.
That we will. We'll kick the first team All-American talk to Sunday, whether Zach and I do it together or I do it, and then Zach can, do his thing where he talks about it and says what he would do differently. We'll do something like that next week. So, I think we'll just go ahead and end it there. So, good discussion, Zach. Appreciate you doing that. Everybody, appreciate you all being here, listening in. Zach, you got any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Not that I'm counting, but 25 days until we talk real football.
And we could even do some previews and stuff before that. So
yeah, we're not going to be talking about this SEC bias garbage anymore. It'll just be and hopefully no more stuff about Michigan scandals. Just football, foot to ball.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. For sure. Blue Wolverine says new sponsors on the lower third. Yeah, so last Thursday we talked about it, but I'll go ahead and remove the comments so everybody can see. So we announced we were with Believe in July, and that's awesome. Believe has partnered with FanDuel now, so FanDuel is also pseudo sponsoring the show because of Believe and everything like that. So you got your odds and everything else over there at FanDuel. That's what we'll be referencing and using on this show, and then you can catch all of our content over there at Believe. Appreciate you asking that, and there, Blue Wolverine, and bringing that up once again. Mm-hmm. Zach, do you have anything? Final thoughts or anything before we get out of here?
Nope. Excited just to be back to actually feel healthy again. So
there you go.
was grateful that Jeff was able to take my spot, do a great job in my in my absence, but it's good to be back.
Jeff's the man. Jeff's the man. And you're the man too, Zach. We appreciate you coming in and being here. Everybody else, we appreciate you coming in, listening. Helps us obviously a lot to have you listening. And for those that sent super chats, the Alchemist, and everybody else, we appreciate you doing that as well. So we will see you next time Thursday night, me and Jeff for Big Jeff's Insights, and then Sunday when Zach and I will be in the same state. Should be a good time. See you next time.